All right, all right. Hey, I think we are live. Man, so real quick before we get started today. So Mike, I'm gonna let you introduce yourself, man. Tell us a little bit about what you do since you are kind of on the Kingdom Calibrate team, but you're also doing your own thing. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, man. Calibrate, unite. Hey, how's everybody doing? My name is Mike Lacoste. I go by DeMac. DeMac stands for Deeply Anointed Music About Christ. I do a full-time traveling music ministry, just going over the country, doing concerts and events, doing music for Jesus, and also a new member of Kingdom Calibrate. So
yeah, and I had an applause button. Oh, hold on. I've got one, but I missed the cue already.
Oh,
there we go.
Thank you.
That's all good. That studio audience loves you, man.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, man. So, hey, thanks for joining me today. We've been talking a little bit about doing these, kind of worship Q&A sessions, and I think you're a really good person to talk to because as a performing musician, like number one, you've kind of built your own following and your own ministry kind of from the ground up, which I tell you all the time, man, that's super impressive just from my perspective because that's blood, sweat, and tears, and you know that life, right? So because you're doing a lot of stuff yourself, I think you could really help speak into a few different questions that we had going today. So before we jump into that real quick, I'm going to share just one quick announcement that we've got coming up for Kingdom Calibrate for anybody that's watching. The very next event we've got coming up is going to be Saturday, March 18th. 11 o'clock, hosted at Centerville Grace Church in Centerville, Ohio. Man, if you've got anybody from your worship team or just your tech team, anybody from across the board, these are events that we do locally right here in Dayton, Ohio, to really help build some community with one another because, this whole worship ministry thing can be a very isolating ministry, and we need to find as much support as possible. So these are free brunch provided, right? You don't have to bring anything. You don't have to do anything. Just show up. But you can RSVP on our website at www.kingdomcalibrate.com. There's a little RSVP button. So be sure to jump on there, and we'll have all these conversations in person. Get some free food, and let's just talk about ministry and how we can help and serve one another together. Yeah. All right. That's all the business out the way. So this is where we're going today. We have kind of three questions we're going to answer. One of them that just came in about 5 minutes ago through our website. And anybody that's watching, if you guys have something you want to ask for any of our future sessions or even for this section, I think we can see the chat right now. So if you got something, you can throw that in the chat. Feel free to do that. But our goal is just to have conversations. We don't know all the right answers to all these things, but we can have conversations and help one another. All right, Mike. So here's our first question. You ready for this one? I think you're going to like this. How do you deal with difficult creative personalities on your team? Oh man, I'd love to hear your feedback on that one. It's like you're a music professional, right? So you know what it takes. You know how creative people are wired. So like, what are the challenges for creative people when it comes to like serving in team-based ministry from your perspective?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that I've run into on the road is like like you said, difficult creative personality is sometimes like the idea can be super amazing. It's just explaining what the vision is. So like they might have this idea that's outstanding, but the way it's being communicated, like it's hard for everyone to see the vision, if that makes sense. Yeah. So it'd be difficult to see the big picture if you can't explain how to get there. You know what I mean? So I've always said, like, if it's a difficult, creative personality, I always try to take a step back. You know what I mean? Like, I try to step outside of myself and try to, like, legit engage in that perspective. And if I can't see it, I try to ask more questions to get to understand the vision or understand that person. So for me, I say communication is a big thing because sometimes what we consider to be difficult might just be someone being quirky or someone that's not the most social person, more introverted, but just extreme great creative mind. So I always say take a step back and truly try to seek understanding of what they're trying to convey.
Oh, that's really good, man. That's really good. I think when we interact with creative people and like being creative people ourselves, like, I always tell people like, man, creative people are a quirky bunch, right? The reason that ministry kind of feels isolating sometimes is because it's hard to be understood and it's hard for other people to understand us. And like, we know that just kind of comes with the territory, right? Because usually the more creative you are, the more, maybe social quirks that you might have, because like there's something ridiculous about having to practice your craft for hours and hours and years on end, right? Like most people just probably wouldn't do that. Like I remember sitting in a practice room for like 2 or 3 hours at a time. And it's like, who on earth would actually choose to do that? So,
Right.
there's,
Right.
there's already something special about the personality that when we get creative people on a team together,
Exactly.
it can already be a little tricky by nature. But man, I think the communication piece that you talked about is really important because one of the downsides of being creative is I haven't met a ton of creative people that are really incredibly good at being organized and administrative. Right
Mhm.
now, you've had to learn and adapt a lot of those things because you're running your own ministry, right? Like you are the be all end all person for making sure that stuff goes smoothly from
Sure.
the concert itself that you're putting on to the logistics of how to get there to where you're going to stay when you're traveling across the country.
Right. So that does had to be learned over time.
Yeah. So like, man, I think when we're interacting with creative people, it's really coming with a basis of understanding that, it might take them a little longer to figure out what we're trying to communicate, but we need to be really clear in that communication. So, if we have an idea for something, I know we've integrated before, writing in some verses into a song. It's like, okay, how can we pull this off? How can we, add time to our tracks and make sure that we're putting in all the effort ahead of time? So this big, beautiful, creative idea can actually be executed and doesn't just come off as a big giant disaster, right?
Yeah. Logistics is important too, for sure.
Yeah. So, Mike, that's a skill that we can learn as worshipers and as leaders in general. It's just, man, overly communicate because I've learned through my own ministry. And I'm not great at communication, but I feel like I've gotten better at it over time because I've had to. Because people get really upset when they don't know the why of what you're doing.
Oh yeah.
Right. And it's like I have this thing in my head where it's like, oh, I'm really clear about why I'm doing something. But if I don't overly communicate that clarity and that vision to others, it's really easy to get hurt feelings because they don't understand why I'm making the decision that I'm making.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Someone told me you can't over communicate.
Yeah, exactly. And probably it's like what we say, stage presence. It's like
Yeah.
when you think you're communicating a lot, you can probably communicate 50% more, and that's probably enough information for people. Somebody's like, "Man, I was really expressive up on the platform this week," and then you watch the live stream back, and it's like, "I look like this."
Yeah.
Like in your head, you were really going for it. It just didn't quite translate.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's awesome. So yeah, like difficult personalities are just gonna be a part of a creative ministry, and you got to have a good strategy for that. But man, communication, I think you hit it on the head, man. That's the key across the board is just making sure that people feel like they are heard and they are valued. And Jen just put in the chat, like, yeah, everyone's looking to feel heard and understood. And in the leadership role in any church, and man, if you're on the platform, you're in a leadership role, whether you like it or not, right? People see you. Those are the people that you're going to run into at the grocery store. It's like, oh, you're the face of that church, whether you want to be or not.
Exactly.
Right. Overly communicate. That's fantastic.
Yeah, these are facts right here. Yeah, and I think another thing you touched on was like you said, the nonverbal. So like with dealing with difficult personalities, I think it's important for kind of a separate thing. I think it's important for the type of energy that we're giving off as well to them. So because like we might not be saying something, but our nonverbal communication can say just as much. Like if we are looking at them like really like you again or something like that, I think it's important that we give good nonverbal communication with our verbal communication as well, because that can help lead to healthy communication, right? Healthy discussion. So just be mindful of the energy you're giving off as well to difficult people or difficult creative personalities.
For sure. I feel triggered by that comment personally. But that's a good point. That's a good point.
Not you.
Yeah. I'm not going to call it there's certain things I can't say, but I'm going to say resting bad face is what we're going to call that, right? And sometimes you have resting bad face.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to tag off that a little bit. This is not a question that we had, but this is one I'm more curious about having this conversation with you, because this is something like I think the last concert we went to that you were putting on, there was something amazing about what you did that I was really thinking about. Okay, when I'm on the platform, as a worship leader, or I've got somebody on my team that's worship leading, one of the hardest things is to pull people into that experience and make sure it's participatory.
Yeah.
And the coolest thing I watched from when you're up there giving a concert is like, you're walking in with this group of kids and adults together, right?
Yeah.
And everybody starts off just kind of like, looking around at the whole experience. You got the music pumping. It's like, okay, I haven't been, maybe I haven't been to a rap concert or something like that. It's like, I don't know how to engage with this. And like within 3 or 4 minutes, I think it's like, man, you had everybody up on their feet. You had everybody dancing. You were giving them things to do to actually respond. And you were leading, like you transformed the nature of the people in that room. and you turned it from a passive concert into an active, engaging experience. So tell me a little bit about that. Like, tell me how you do that, because that's a skill set that I've tried to learn, to some degree over time. But man,
Oh,
it's hard.
thanks so much, bro. That really means a lot, man. It did not come overnight for sure. I always say like a lot of my events, like I'm a independent artist, right? So I don't have like that huge name. Like my name's on the banner, like who's that? So I'm used to most of my shows. I'm used to that being first time people who don't know who I am, who don't know what to expect, who don't know my songs or my backstory. So I can't really rely on that for excitement, right? So right from the jump, I always tell people like it's up to you to set the tone. Like the crowd might be half awake, might be asleep, might not be engaged. It's up to you to set the tone. The person on stage that's doing presenting, it's up to you to set what that energy is going to be, that tone. I always go out like it's 1,000 people that are having just as much fun as I do, whether they're half awake or engaged or not. Because if you set the tone and set that energy and stay consistent with it, like some people are going to, okay, this is the energy we're set. Some people are going to dive right in. Some people might not dive in, but they're going to be like, okay, this person has something to say. I'm engaged. I want to see what's going on. So I always say, one, set the tone. Don't let the crowd set the tone. Don't let other facts set the tone. You set the tone. So that's always the first thing for me. And the second thing you touch on is inviting people to enter this space with you. Like you said, like I'm like, all right, guys, like hands up right here. I introduce the song. I tell the importance of the song before I do it, or a little story about where the song came from, or someone that really connects to it. I have dances. I have little fun bits, but it's like inviting everyone throughout the night to be a part of this with you. Like, let's create this experience together. And that's something I've always seen you do, Dusty, in worship settings. Like you invite people to worship with you in this space. It's okay to surrender, raise your hands, like invite people to be a part of it. So they know it's okay. So I say set the tone and invite people to be a part of the experience with you. So that's kind of two things I try to do at every event. Sorry, that's kind of wordy.
No, that's good, man. That's something that we try to figure out for years and years how to do that, especially in how that translates to a Sunday morning environment.
Absolutely.
Right, because every church I've been at has a culture, right? It has a culture, it has a unique DNA, it has a unique vision and mission in mind. And there are some churches that are a lot more expressive just by nature. And whether that's, denominationally or what the church background is, or even the city that the church resides in, right? Because even churches take on the characteristics of the city that they're in. So when you're walking into a space like that and you're saying, okay, how am I going to bring people into worship to where it becomes not just a passive experience, but an active experience? Because I think theologically, worship is meant to be, participatory. It's not meant to be a concert, not because it's, we don't want it to be good and excellent like a lot of concerts are, but because, and this is the difference in your concerts and how you bring this stuff. You make those concerts participatory, but not every concert is. Like if I'm going to, the Dayton Philharmonic or the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra, those are not participatory by design. You are to sit there and enjoy the beauty that is happening right there on the stage. But in a church service, it's like, man, if people aren't participating, it doesn't matter how good what's happening on that platform is. It's, we're supposed to be worshiping God together. And it's, we've kind of given that authority to the people on the platform. And we've forgotten that the authority of doing that rests within the entire room, the entire body of the church that's gathered together to worship God. And it's cliche, but people talk about, oh man, if I can get excited about a football game, I can get excited for God. And there's differences there. Like I'll be the first to admit, it's the atmosphere plays a big role in that. When you're walking into a football stadium, you've waited outside for 3 hours in the freezing cold and everybody's, they may have had some substances that are helping them loosen up a little bit. Hopefully we're not having that in church on Sunday morning, but the whole point is, man, it's all about bringing the participation culture to people. And as worship leaders and as people on the platform, the hard part is exactly what you said. It's giving people a reason to participate. And if people aren't participating, how can we help to pull them in? How can we actually provide opportunities? Maybe it's like stopping between song 1 and song 2 and saying, hey, we're here to actually engage in worship. So maybe it's, leading the congregation in some kind of exercise. Like, man, if you want to pray this prayer out loud that the lyrics of this song say, man, just let's raise a hand right now and let's just take baby steps together, right? It's the what about Bobism, the take baby steps to the elevator. We're not going to get from here to here overnight, but we
Absolutely.
can take steps to engage in a more participating culture. And as leaders up on the platform, that's the first place to start, is just try little things, man. Try to just don't
Yeah.
sing at people, make it interactive, man.
Absolutely, and I love it personally when I'm in a worship setting and the worship leaders introducing like a new song and they're sharing like a lyric from that song that really touched them, and like I hope you like look forward to that lyric, or when this bridge comes up, we're gonna sing this part together. So it's like, okay, like they're inviting us into this new song, and how it connects to them personally, and leads us in that worship. So I always enjoy that, that setup, before a song.
Yeah, and it also, and I'm not super good at that. I try to get better at that over time, but like, personalizing is important for the congregation to get to know you, because if I know the person's heart that's supposedly leading me in worship, it's easier for me to connect with that person, right? I want to see a little bit of vulnerability. I want to see that they believe the words that they're singing. And,
Mm. Yeah.
hopefully they've been thinking about those throughout the week, and maybe they've had an interaction throughout the week.
Right.
I've seen a couple of different worship leaders that have been really good at that. And, I have to kind of force myself to get better at that over time, where it's like, all right, I need to be thinking as my week's going on, man, how is there something I'm experiencing this week that lets me tie in and connect with the words of the song that we might be leading this weekend? And maybe there's something I can share within that to give people some encouragement that might be going through a terrible week themselves, right? Because we all come into the space in a completely different mindset. Some people have had terrible weeks. Some people are at the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
Others are in the bottom of the valley. And
Yeah.
we're bringing all those people together
Yeah.
to try to worship God together with a heart full of joy.
Yeah. Good. That's good. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good stuff, man. So we had two more questions, I think, on our list today. So this one came from Josh here in Dayton. So he said, "Hey, talk a little bit about what discipleship looks like on the worship team and how that might transform our weekend experiences." So I guess the second question is, if we're doing discipleship well, how does that transform how we interact as a team and with our congregations on the weekend? So yeah, that's a harder one. You want to start with that one?
Yeah. So, in my personal life of traveling, there have been times where I'll have younger artists on the road with me, and I always tell them like the bulk of ministry is going to take place off stage. So, when I was mentoring young guys, it's a matter of taking them aside and praying with them, calling them up and checking in on them. When I had a devotional that really hit me, forwarding that to them. Hey, this message connected me today. Check this out. Reaching out to them, find out where they are currently in their walk, in their life. What's going well? Where are they struggling? Where they need prayer? Being intentional and being transparent about who I am on stage, off stage. Like letting them see me off stage. When we're when I'm interacting with people before and after concerts, when I'm in the process of booking or meeting with pastors, like literally having them walk through what it looks like to do the ministry. So I'd imagine as a worship leader, a similar type of situation, like, Sunday mornings or weekend experiences. It's like what happens off the stage. Are you praying over your member? Are you praying over the people on your team? Or are you engaging them outside of off stage? Are you praying for them? Are you doing devotionals with them? Are you checking in on them? Is there accountability? All these things that take place off stage. That's why I'd kind of say there would probably be a good area.
Yeah, it's really good, man. Off stage, one of the questions I always ask people when we either get to a new church or we were trying to learn a new worship team and trying to figure out the culture and the dynamics that are present there. Asking people, what do we do when we're not at practice and we're not at church together? Do we have any kind of relationship that exists outside of these walls?
Yeah.
And discipleship kind of starts there, because I haven't found a good way, and maybe someone much smarter than myself has figured out a great way to do that in the context of like, a practice. Maybe it's leading a devotion. I think we've tried that with various degrees of success, sometimes before practice, sometimes after practice. I really like to do kind of prayer circles as we end rehearsals together, just to make sure that we're kind of, putting all of our hearts in the same direction as we're praying for God to do something powerful in our services on the weekend. But it's really hard to have a discipling relationship with people that you're only ever working with and you don't actually live life with. Right.
That's
like,
good.
community is a huge thing, man. And I think that goes beyond worship leadership and just into church leadership in general, where, what are people looking for? And we think that people are looking for maybe the right kind of church or the right denomination or the right background, or, hey, I want a church that believes this and this. I want people to be friendly. I think, to be honest, beyond all that stuff, I think what people are looking for is community as the very first entry point into a church. If you can't find community, it doesn't matter how good the church is. It doesn't matter how theologically sound it is, how great the preaching is, how great the worship team is. If you can't find community there, you're not going to engage. So how do we do that on a worship team, with all these creative, like-minded people? And, it gets really difficult because you've got to carve out extra time. And, if we're asking people to be at a rehearsal and we're saying, hey, if you're going to serve on our team, we need you X amount of hours per week. That's kind of just part of the deal. We want to make sure we're practiced and we do things with excellence. And then I don't want to ask any more of people to come together for something else because I've already, they're already giving me like 10 hours this week and they're already working full-time jobs and they have 4 kids. And, you go through the list and you start making all these excuses that it's like, discipleship's the last piece we want to ask for because we see that as that's the extra piece. And we don't want to over ask. But the hard part is, man, if we don't have the discipleship piece, then the rest of everything we do is not very effective. Because if we're not worshiping together, if we don't know each other's hearts, we're not going to be very effective leading a room in worship because we can't take the congregation to places that we haven't already been ourselves.
Right. That's good. That's a bar right there.
You might be the most encouraging person I know, to be honest with you. I mean, so I appreciate these conversations. I always feel slightly better
That's
about
awesome,
myself.
dude,
But like a practical way we've kind of done that at a couple different churches, and we're doing it at our current church now, is just talking about doing worship nights together. And we just did a couple weeks ago, we did a family meal with the people on our worship team. It's like, man, it's something I taught this at the conference last week at Cedarville, one of the breakout sessions. Like, there's something magical that happens when you put food in the equation when it comes to building up community and starting those discipleship conversations where food is the magical. I don't know, man. It's the best thing in the world. It's what brings people together. And Jesus knew that real well. He knew that when he pulled people together at the table, good conversations were going to happen.
Right.
And, that was the last thing Jesus did before he was crucified was, he gathered his disciples around the table for a last meal. And it's like, man, there's something spiritual about food. And some of us can over spiritualize it. I'm guilty of that myself. But, I believe that's a great place for community to start. And something that we designed this I guess it's probably been about a year and a half ago. And I'll see if I can add this to the stream. All this technology is still new to me, but these were kind of discipleship pillars that we designed for our last worship team. There we go. So when we're looking at how to do discipleship with our team, we kind of divide it into 4 categories. Like, hey, worship, there's a lot of ways we can worship together. Obviously, that's our role on the weekends. Learning, which to me just means, hey, we're always looking to engage with scripture. And obviously it's more than just learning that happens, but we want to know more about God. And serving, which we're also kind of doing as we worship, how are we serving the church that we're in to where it's not just a select few people running it, but we all have a role to play in it. And then, giving, which is, hey, do we have a lifestyle of generosity? And we can go a lot of different directions with that. But like, these are kind of basic pillars of discipleship. And all those are founded within the relationship we have within that person. So like, if I got people on my team, it's not enough for me to say, hey, can you do all the necessary musical skills? Can you play your instrument? Can you do it well with excellence? I'd rather ask people, man, what is God speaking to you? When we meet with people, it's like, man, what is God telling you in this season? What are you learning about God? What are ways that I can be praying for you? Because as, a spiritual leader on that team, man, my biggest priority should be, how can I pray for my team? Not how can I make them musically better or teach them new skills? And that's really hard for creative people because we geek out on the new skills part and the new technology. And it's real easy to spend a whole week, programming lights and building amazing tracks and, making something that we feel is going to be fantastic for the weekend.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah, that's real talk.
All right, man. That's a hard one. I think that will be I think we'll be developing some workshops around that just to figure out how to practically do that within a worship team.
Yeah.
And obviously these conversations, we're only scratching the surface of that stuff, but if we went too much into detail, then we wouldn't have any reason for people to engage in all these other fun things that we offer, like these worship courses and things like that.
Yeah. Got to have wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more for only 4 easy payments at $24.95.
Yeah.
Oh man, I was just reading here through the chats as I'm talking. We had somebody, Monkey Man. Do you listen to the Arctic Monkeys? Do you know the Arctic Monkeys, Mike?
Heard that name.
I have too, and I don't know. Like, it's got to be an art rock band. It's like an alt rock band, right?
Yeah.
All right, and that's about all I know of the Arctic Monkeys. But I'll take it, man. I'm all into any odd music I can find that's slightly outside of mainstream, which is great.
I'll put that up too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good deal, good deal. So nobody else is asking anything yet in the chat, but we've got one more question before we end our time together. So this is a tricky one too. How do you build a relationship between the tech team and the worship team? And this is good for you because you do both, right? You're in a role where you are your own worship team and you are your own tech team. Because when you're doing a concert, like you're running your own lights, you're running your own tracks, you're doing both sides of the show, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
So tell us how important it is to know both sides of that role and have a connection there.
Yeah, man. I think when you kind of know the ins and outs of something, you appreciate it way more. Like for example, when I first started, I didn't have my own production. I didn't know how to run sound. I didn't know how to do lighting. I just kind of showed up to venues and used whatever they had, right? But once I started acquiring my own sound and own lighting and screens and visuals, it's like, oh wow, a lot of work goes into this. You know what I mean? So I have a great appreciation for people that make the weekend experience happen, right? Like they're spending hours getting slides ready, getting video content ready. They're the ones getting the cameras ready, charging cameras, getting videos, getting different shots. So personally, once you kind of see some of the ins and outs that go on with that, I always try to personally, when I'm a visiting person at an event or a church service, and I get to do songs of worship team sometimes. So when I show up to a new environment, I always make an effort to greet everyone there, not just the worship team, but also the whole tech team. And when I see something, I always try to compliment that, like a video person. Hey, video person, like the angles you got on that video were awesome. Yo, whoever did these slides, they're fantastic. So just acknowledging people, I think goes a long way.
Yeah, man, it's like the lost art of encouragement, right? Something that we just don't do very well anymore. And like I've seen it over and over again where there's like this divide between the worship team and the tech team.
Yeah.
And like it's not good, right? It's not good. Because like to me, those are two sides of the same coin. It's
Right.
like, it's like if you take worship as a big bubble, it's like you've got the front facing worship, which is the team that's on the platform, and you've got the backside of worship, which is all the tech team who's actually making all that stuff happen. And if it doesn't matter how good you rehearse and how good your band sounds, if that sound guy, you don't have a great relationship with him, they got more power than you do, man. It doesn't matter what you're putting out there. They're going to translate that to other people.
Exactly. A sound person can make you sound like Elevation or sound like a karaoke machine.
That's right. That's right. True story. I mean, sometimes worse than a karaoke machine.
Yeah.
It's I don't know why that exists. I think I know why that exists, at least in my experience. I think there's a little bit of a different mindset sometimes between the the musicians on the platform and the people running tech stuff in the back, because I find that, like, at least around here and like a lot of the suburban churches where we're around here in Dayton, it seems like the tech areas have a little bit more people that are like engineering minded. And some of that might just be, Dayton itself is a very, we have a lot of scientists and military and, a lot of very intelligent people around here who are very detail oriented. But, the musicians on the platform tend to be a little bit more kind of right brain creative. So it's almost like you're combining this left brain skill, which is the engineering skill that understands the technology and the integration. And then you've got these right brain creatives that might be up on the platform. And it's like they don't know how to speak to each other.
Interesting. Huh.
And I don't know how accurate that is. It's just like I've just seen that now a number of times over and over again.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that I'll ask a worship team is like, hey, who do you consider part of your team? And if they only say the people on the platform, I think that's divide number one right there. Is like, man, if you're not involving the tech folks in your worship team and consider them a normal part of your team, that's going to create a divide by nature, right?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
And it's like we need them desperately. And not only do we need them, like we don't just need people to serve, we need people to actually have a heart for how the stuff that we're doing is going to translate to the congregation. It's like, man, when you're on a soundboard back there, like you are playing an instrument, and that's a hard instrument to play.
You definitely, and you want someone like with the people that have the passion to sing their best to give glory. the person behind that soundboard has that same passion, just in a different capacity. They have a passion to mix and EQ, to have so that sounds great on everyone's ear. So there's passion there on both ends. I think it's just recognizing, hey, there's passion here too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, man, invite the, like if we're gathering our worship team together,
Yeah,
and it's so important to invite, make sure we know that our tech folks are part of those teams.
absolutely.
And, not just say it, like actually make sure that's a real thing.
Yeah,
And like, and that also helps, like, if you're having discipleship relationships, going back to our last question, if we should be discipling and having that relationship with our tech folks the same way we do with the people on the platform. So like, man, it is one team. It is front
yeah,
of house, back of house. You need both sides of that.
absolutely.
And man, that creates a lot of divide. And the last thing you want is a bad relationship with your tech people, because if you're on the platform and you need help with something,
Yeah.
and I've seen this over and over again too. It's like, hey, turn me up back there.
Yeah.
It's like this like yelly kind of relationship. It's like, oh, that's destructive. Like, no, man, it's like you need to actually respect the people on the other side of that, invite them into part of your team, and talk to them the same way you talk to your guitarist, you talk to one of your vocalists. It's all about respect, man.
Yeah. So I have two thoughts there. Like you said, like, because I've witnessed that too. Like when they're sound checking, it's like, hey, sound guy. It's like, wait, person's name, learn their name. Hey, Eric, do you mind if we can EQ this? I can't really hear this, learn their name,
Yeah, absolutely.
person, so that's one thought. When you say, I was like, oh, I've witnessed that so many times. And the second thing that I've witnessed is, which I think is great, a lot of times, like a worship pastor before service starts, say, hey, we're gonna go pray before service, which I think is great. But so many times I've witnessed they just include the people on stage. Like there's been times like they even invite me, like as a guest rapper, I wasn't invited, or no one on the tech team is invited. They just, hey, the worship people that I sing with every week on stage, I'm just gonna go pray with them. That kind of creates a divide too. So maybe like probably not right before service, because you gotta have screens and video going. But hey, maybe just a half hour before service when everyone's open, bring everybody in, bring the tech team, bring the guests, worship singers as well, the band, and all pray together, make it one team. That I think that would help with like just little things like that. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, that's really good, man. Really good. That's exactly right. Yeah, in all of our prayer times, that's such a great point, man. Bring in your tech team. Make sure you've got that relationship. Like man, tech folks are people too. That needs to be a T-shirt. Tech team. How do I word that grammatically correct? Not the way I just tried to say it.
Yeah.
Not a do not feed the animals, right? I've seen that sign back there too, but no, it's like, yeah.
There.
Tech team are people too. Come on.
Tech team or people too. Yeah.
Good. All right. In the chat, we've got Sarah Walton says, what is your worship team's vision statement? Working on mine and would love to have some examples. And I'm at a newer church right now that I haven't been at very long, so I don't know. We don't really have one yet. But I've got, like, for me, I've got statements that I carry to any worship team I'm on, because I think the theological vision of where we're going with worship is going to be more set by the church that we're serving in than it is by our worship team in and of itself. But we've got really practical statements that we'll talk about. And one of my favorite, it's more of a mission statement than a vision statement, I guess. But you hit this earlier. We call it being a thermostat, not a thermometer. Right. So like our mission for our worship team is to come in and set the culture of engagement, set the culture of worship in the room, and not to respond to what the culture already is in the room. Right. So what do I mean by that? I mean, like, hey, when you're walking into a room, nobody's participating. We're not going to respond with that same energy. We're going to set the thermostat. Because when you set a thermostat, you're setting the temperature, and then you're waiting for everything else to come up to that temperature. You're not reflecting what the room is and keeping it there. So for us, that's more just a practical statement. It's not so much a vision statement, but more of a mission statement. But I don't know. I'd be interested to hear. I know there's a lot of different churches that have kind of worship team vision statements. And, we had a lot of statements that we all kind of put together as we were talking what discipleship looks like on our team. But I don't know if we really had just one. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just think like with like my own traveling ministry, like the vision's always been, from my perspective, it's always been engage the youth, engage the community, using hip hop music as a vehicle to spread the gospel. So that's always kind of been the vision of the MAC, So whenever I am in different worship settings, there's different people. Like I think you said like the church culture, the location, kind of can dictate what the vision is. So I've run into different visions over time. But yeah, I just think of my own. That's kind of always been my vision, you know.
Yeah, it's good.
So
awesome. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they'd be curious in the chat, man, if anybody's got, specific worship team vision statements for their worship teams. Like, I'd love to see those there. Maybe we could share those in a later episode and just kind of compare and contrast. That'd be a great discussion for our brunches too. Talking about vision statements.
That's definitely a good one. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, man. Well, I think that's pretty much all we had. We're at like 35 minutes, which is fantastic, man. I love the conversation, and this is way better than me just talking to myself. So Mike, thanks for jumping on here, man. And before we go, where can we find your music? Where can we find your website?
Absolutely. Yes. My music's available pretty much anywhere you like to consume music. So Spotify, Tidal, YouTube, iTunes, pretty much anywhere that you like to consume music digitally, it's available. My website is iamdemac.com. It has my music content and music videos, my testimony / bio, all those fun things. And yeah, you can catch me on the road, hopefully a city near you. I'm hitting the road next week. So
yeah, man, where are you going next week?
Next week starts a 3-week tour. I'm going to do Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama. So
just a quick little jog,
Yeah, quick little jog block. So, yeah.
Awesome, man. That's great, man. I know you're gonna do some good ministry work out there and keep spreading that message. But whenever you get back, man, I love having you on our team. So
Oh, dude, Kingdom Calibrate all day. KC, baby.
Oh, so good, so good. Hey, Mike, thank you, man, for jumping on here and just having those conversations with us. I'm sure it's been, hopefully helpful to everybody, including myself, getting able to hear some of that stuff and just really thinking about how we can engage in our worship ministries in a more encouraging way, in a more thoughtful way, and where we can just keep learning from one another. And I think for each of these episodes, we're going to keep bringing on some different people. Maybe we'll have 2 or 3. I don't know. I don't know what our limit is. I haven't found it yet. I think it might be 3 or 4 that we can do in a call like this. But man, the goal is to have conversations, not to have all the right answers, but that's how we learn, right? We're in discipling relationships, even with those of us that we don't even know yet. And that's how we're learning from one another. So, guys, thank you for jumping on. Make sure you visit us at kingdomcalibrate.com. You can see upcoming events. We'd love to see you at some of our in-person brunches or maybe some of our virtual classes where we can teach a lot of these things and go into a whole lot more detail as opposed to conversations. Those are more like classes where we can learn from one another as well. So check us out. Make sure you're on our Facebook page. We've got a YouTube page, which is at Kingdom Calibrate. We have a Twitter, which is at Kingdom Calibrate minus the O, because we had a character limit and we couldn't get a name that was that long, which is tragic. And I think we're on Instagram too. So, hey, yo. So guys, thank you. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday, 1:00. If you've got questions, you can go to kingdomcalibrate.com/ask a worship leader. And those are gonna be questions you can submit. We'll talk about in all these conversations beginning next week. So thank y'all for joining in. We'll see you next time.